Robert, now I guess you mentioned your first movie reference, and we'll get into the second one, which is going to come in the critical race theory case, which is DMAR versus District 65. Now, reading this case, I forget what it was. District 9. What was the movie? I didn't see the movie. I just know what it's about.
The movie's called District 9. Yeah,
District 9. The fact that it's called District 65 as a defendant in this lawsuit throughout the lawsuit is telling. This lawsuit, I read this, and I don't want to use hyperbolic rhetoric. I felt like I was losing my mind reading this lawsuit. What they're teaching in schools, if the allegations in this lawsuit are correct and accurate, is over the top. And I don't know how it has even gotten to the point where this could be acceptable to any, let alone to the many. But I suspect the many just don't know what's going on. And so the first thing to say in this lawsuit is that the plaintiff has to be very courageous to have filed the suit, because I think she's a creative arts teacher and who's filed the suit in her own name, knowing the backlash that she's going to get in this particular environment. But basically going after the schooling system for teaching critical race theory to kids as young as pre-K, reading certain books. I mean, I wish maybe one day I'll learn how to screen share, but I think it'll detract from the overall, just from the discussion. But they're teaching things to pre-K kids, reading a book that basically say whiteness is bad. It was a bad deal to begin with. You effectively shaming people based on race, effectively, and of their own admission, separating everyone by race, identifying them as having the racial aspect being their defining aspect for the purposes of demonizing whiteness, and portraying it as something to be ashamed of, to the point where you have to renounce it effectively. The curriculum's nuts. And the question is, does this violate certain laws? Does this violate certain constitutional rights? I don't understand how, in a country that has civil rights, we know who started the civil rights movement and who was intended to protect, but we can all agree it's intended to protect, I imagine, all civilians and not just some. But how did we get to this point where they are teaching this in schools and it has not been checked at any point until now?
It was a shift. I mean, well, credit to Christopher Rufo and others for highlighting it and bringing it to, and Tucker Carlson, because, Rufo was on a campaign along with others, James Lindsay, who will be a future sidebar guest, on this issue, bringing it to the public attention, the court of public opinion. Then Tucker Carlson promoted it. That got President Trump's attention. And then Chris Wallace had to lie about it in the first debate and pretend it was about something other than it was. What they've masqueraded it as is as teaching about the history of racial discrimination and just having honest history. That's never what it was. It was always about shifting the paradigm from racial equality to racial equity, from race neutrality to race essentialism. It's where the alt-right and alt-left all agree is on racial essentialism. Everything's defined by skin color. I mean, it's particularly the white thing is kind of crazy because, I mean, that's a construct of the last 100 years. It didn't exist 200 years ago. The idea that Italians and Poles and Russians and all are all the same because they have the same pigmentation of skin, preposterous.
And to break it down there, like, this is where I say, the whiteness thing makes no sense because of that. I mean, obviously, like all Europeans are white, or except some aren't white. I don't know where they draw that line. But even within the whiteness, if you're gay, I guess you are now within a subsect of the whiteness that is not part of the whiteness. And if you identify as other, you are now no longer within this. If you are hypothetically an Anglo-Quebecer in French Quebec, you might be white, but you might not be part of the whiteness. If you're an Irish Catholic in a Protestant society, you might not be part of the construct is that's the oversimplification of how insidious this notion is that you break it down. There might be like that. The only, I mean, you might be left with Bill Gates as the personification of whiteness. Everyone else can find an exception somewhere down the line.
Well,
sorry.
And what they did here, you're right, is crazy. I mean, first, they're being taught to 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. But the second thing, and so they're being taught that race is their identity. White, it's a form of blood libel. It's a form of Marxism. Hate people that are a different race than you. only celebrate the racial identity in you unless you're white, and then feel ashamed about it. Go through a Mao-style cultural revolution struggle session. That's what a lot of these were. Requiring teachers and staff to go on shame walks for being white. Privilege, go on and do privilege speeches for being white. One teacher telling another teacher they're going to take their metaphorical machete and strike them down until they admit and acknowledge the evil of their skin color. This is what was being taught in public schools and being demanded. I mean, this was the person who brought suit is a drama teacher. It's not like they're some right winger. They're just like, I believe in individuality and creativity, and this is bad for the soul.
The thing that I found most shocking was the open stated desire to what was the word they used, to break down the nuclear family. And
yes.
That's
white. For people that don't know, this is why BLM is obsessed with this. The nuclear family is a white creation. We should go back to some sort of like having multiple spouses, not really even having spouses. I mean, the nuclear family itself is inherently evil, and this was being taught in our public schools.
Well, I want to say this is the soft bigotry of low expectations to the idea that a two-parent household, the nuclear family, is white and not, for the people who say trust the science, and not scientifically and statistically proven to have benefits for the raising of children. For the people saying trust the science, to then come out and say we should deconstruct the nuclear family because it's evil, because it's white, other than being absolutely racist as a statement itself, as if other cultures were not brought up on two-parent households. I'm not even making suppositions of gender. The more cohesive a family, the more beneficial effects on the children is, if not science, at the very least statistics. And for the people saying trust the science, which implies statistics, to say this, it's over the top. But it's also just, it is fundamentally racist through the soft bigotry of low expectations to say that the nuclear family is white. And that should offend everybody. But that's where I sort of lost it when I was reading this lawsuit. Yeah, a drama teacher, sorry, not a creative arts, a drama teacher has to file this suit knowing full well that there were internal emails basically saying castigate and intimidate anybody who comes out against this. And which brought us to the causes of action. I'm just saying, like, what laws does this, other than being offensive and insidious and disgusting and made me want to pull my kids out of public school if they were there or have a serious discussion with them, what laws does this break concretely for anybody who says, okay, I hate CRT, but why is it illegal? And how can people protest against this judicially, and through the courts?
Well, two different ways. One is that all of our laws are based on race neutrality and race equality. So our laws, our Constitution, and all of our race discrimination laws are almost all entirely opposed to the doctrine of racial equity or racial essentialism or racial identitarianism or racial sectarianism. So our laws say anything that highlights race, that discriminates against race, that uses race to judge people and assess people, and in any way discriminates against them in their treatment by their employer, by the government, is wrong, is illegal. And that's why all of CRT is illegal. And they were just getting away with it because they made sure nobody either knew about it, and those who knew about it, they intimidated and not bringing suit about it. And then they lie about what it is when they get in front of them. The problem is guys like Christopher Rufo have been getting the documents from whistleblowers all over the place. Disney was about to teach critical race theory. They need to teach screenwriting is what they need to teach. Instead of just hiring wokesters, and you end up with Black Widow is going to lose a ton of money because they decided to have a woke plot combined with woke directors and a woke screenwriters. Not working out, folks. But the same thing with CRT is that this is it's inherently discriminatory, inherently violations of the Constitution of almost every state and of the United States government and of federal and state law. And that's why they brought claims under all of those grounds, because this is deeply offensive. The second component is passing laws that ban this. And of course, it's the never Trump world of David French, etc. Little Frenchie who had to quit running because he didn't want to, only get 100 votes for the presidency and have to be embarrassed. Who's out there pretending this is about free speech. This has nothing to do with free speech. This is public schools. So this is what public schools teach is not subject to First Amendment protection. What you do outside of the school is what the student sometimes does is, but not the teacher, because we're paying for that with our tax dollars. That is subject to the determination of the community. But the one thing they can't teach is open racial discrimination and racial prejudice, and that's what critical race theory is. So this is one of the best lawsuits to expose what critical race theory is all about. for anybody out there that has friends or other people saying, "Oh, I just heard it's about opposing racial discrimination." Just send them a copy of this suit. Say, okay, would you like to walk on a white shame walk just because of the color of your skin?
Robert, if I may, can I share the version you sent me, which has highlights in it?
Oh, yeah.
Someone remind me. I'm going to share because I pulled it up now. First of all, to answer the question of the comment there, the chat was, in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois Eastern Division, Stacey Demar versus Board of Education, the City of Vlawg, District 65. Let me just get to the book that they read, because the book was really. Oh, I'm not going to find it.
My brother was recently at. We may have him on in the fall because he's writing a book, but the philosophy professor. But he was at his bookstore. Those still exist. They're shrinking, but it was at a bookstore with his daughter, and it's like every other book was some version of critical race theory or some identity politics for kids. I mean, they're doing. That's why they took over the Hollywood as much as they could. They're indoctrinating kids, and a lot of Zoomers believe in a lot of this gibberish. They believe that the mythology. And that's because, unbeknownst to many of us, it's what's been taught in schools now for half a decade.
And I got the section. For example, this is an allegation in the lawsuit, paragraph 126. For example, in 2020-2021, all teachers from pre-K through 5th grade were instructed to read aloud "Not My Idea," a book about whiteness, ordinary terrible things, by Anastasia Higginbotham. I don't know who that person is. Not My Idea teaches, quote, "Racism is a white person's problem and we are all caught up in it," end quote. Not My Idea teaches, quote, "Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones." Interesting hashtag confession through projection. Not My Idea teaches, quote, "In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against black people for 400 years. Not My Idea teaches, quote, "White supremacy has been lying to kids for centuries." Not My Idea teaches, quote, "Innocence is overrated." Not My Idea teaches, "Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was." That's one of the things. That's a book they're reading to pre-K. The thing is this. I like to think that I have an open enough mind that I would be outraged by this, but I would have the discussion with my kids. But I can see people not being so open-minded about having their pre-K read this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably have my kid wear "My teacher's a racist" T-shirt to school, and, cause a lawsuit. But
or show up with the InfoWars mug, although no one would know what the graphic was.
Yeah, that's probably right. Just keep flashing that whenever the teacher was talking.
God, man, I remember the first time. I never knew what that mug was, Robert, until someone said IW. I was like, and I finally put it together. But I think someone in the chat helped me.
An I and a W.
Okay, let's see. I mean, my issue with this though is that it seems to be literally mainstream streamlining the idea that only white people can be racist, and that when it's racism against white people, it's not racism because racism is, what is it? Discrimination plus power, something along those lines, where the idea is defining racism as something that cannot affect anybody else except for the people you want to demonize. But this CRT literally seems to be the embodiment of that philosophy, that it's not racist
and
because it's against white.
Polled, a majority of both Black Americans and Latinos don't support CRT. So the idea that this is popular within those, it's not. I mean, there's a reason why Trump did better amongst both groups. That this kind of politics is not really popular with anybody outside of a small portion of the professional class left politically. But look at who dominates the legal profession. That's exactly who dominates it.
Let's see here. It says, Ian Hall says, "LOL, Mr. Barnes, if you want an educational law title compliance person, you let me know. I happen to know a very bored retired educator bulldog who advocates against educational administrators and will be happy to eviscerate them." Again, she is bored. I forgot what I was just about to say. It had to do with, it's the soft bigotry stuff. If I am, I don't want to go towards my specific identity, nor will I. If I am any identity that is caught up in this CRT, I'm offended at the idea that someone says a 2-parent household is white. And I'm offended that anyone says math, logic, punctuality. Anything that is on the list of white privilege is itself racism, because it implies that anyone who's not white is not capable of or does not respect these values. And it basically, it's demeaning and racist on its face, and not against the white people, but it cloaks it in such a way that Yeah, everyone else is just incapable of these things, which every culture on earth pretty much has valued. And math itself, as far as I know, was not a white person's construct in the first place. But I will say it again and I'll end it on this. It's soft bigotry of low expectations, and everyone, especially those who are being protected by this, should be offended by this.
Yep. Yeah, the only ancestry I identify as my favorite one in the census, which they run into a lot. Census takers get confused in parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and some other parts where they say, "What, are you English? Are you French? Are you German?" They're like, "No, I'm American." And then they ask them, "No, we mean what?" "No, American." And that's still my favorite ancestry. And it's the ancestry that we all belong to, and that does not teach racism in any form.
And
Go ahead.
Oh, no, it'll be the segue, but I've had this argument, I've had this discussion. In as much as history has a tainted, did I say America? In as much as America has a tainted history, has blemishes on its history, so does Canada. When it comes to the outrageous acts that whites have committed in the 400 years of American history, it was America that freed the slaves globally, and not just on American soil, despite international pressure to not do so. It was, in as much as Americans participated in the Atlantic slave trade, they were the ones that rose up against it and fought against it and freed the slaves, despite opposition from every other power overseas, in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And so it's like Trudeau goes around celebrating the tragedies and ignoring the successes. One has to be intellectually honest in the manner in which they deal with these things, and to focus on that as the core element of CRT, to ignore the greatness of America and that it has done despite its blemishes, is intellectually and historically dishonest.